All right, guys. Hello. You should all be here. And speak of the devil, Pisco, joining us
Hey there.
literally at the 12th hour, right as we go live. Pisco, making us
How we
wait.
doing, folks?
Making the congressman wait. I should say, Pisco is as we're
My
live to the
apologies,
audience.
Congressman.
Well, guys, this is Live and Learn. As you can see, Josiah's not here. He had some personal logistics he was taking care of. And so we're here with just the three boys plus one extra boy, Adam Mockler. And we've got the congressman as well. Congressman, please introduce yourself. This is the Live and Learn audience. And we can kind of get this show on the road.
Hey, man. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Raja Krishnamoorthi. I'm the representative for the 8th Congressional District of Illinois. So it's all the suburbs surrounding O'Hare International Airport, including the runways, but not the terminals. And that's called gerrymandering. And I like to joke with anybody who's ever flown to O'Hare, I got you coming and going. And so that's where I represent.
Hey, I live in Chicago. We can talk about it after, but I don't want to give away my district. But yeah, I think that I just moved into your district like a month ago.
Oh my gosh. I know your congressman. Cool guy.
Interesting.
Cool guy. Well, yeah, Raja, thanks so much for joining us. We love to have different elected officials on. We recently had Wickler over in Wisconsin, the chair of the Wisconsin Democratic Party on, and he was able to come on and talk to us about the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. What are the big issues that you're working on right now? What are the big events, big current events, I guess I should say, that you're bringing most of your attention to? And how's that been going?
Well, thanks for having me on. The biggest issue that I've been focused on is cuts to Medicaid. So we just had a roundtable yesterday at Cook County Healthcare, which is the largest, I think it might be one of the top 2 largest public hospitals in the country. It's run by the county, and it's basically there for people who have no insurance, people who can't go anywhere else for healthcare. And their biggest payer is Medicaid. And so right now, when the Republicans talk about funding their $7 trillion in tax cuts, with upwards of $1.5 trillion in spending cuts, much of which is going to come from Medicaid. And by the way, the balance, the other $5.5 trillion, is basically deficit and debt spending. When you talk about the $1.5 trillion in spending cuts, it hits the patients. It hits the constituents and residents of Cook County hard, and the people who go to this hospital. So I went there, had a roundtable. I personally am a child of food stamps and public housing. I spent about half of my early childhood in those 2 life-sustaining programs. So this is a personal issue for me. And so I can talk more about this, but it was an excellent event, shining light on the harm, the real harm that you're going to do to real people if you cut Medicaid the way that the Republicans want to as part of their plans.
So, Congressman, go ahead, Hutch. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, so obviously the party's options are somewhat limited because we're the minority party right now. So what do you see as the role of the Democratic Party in a moment like this? Like, what are the options that you guys have in terms of raising awareness and putting pressure on maybe sensitive, maybe Republicans that are serving in swing districts? What's the game plan?
Yes, sir. Great question, Hutch. So, okay, 4 things that we have to do. 1, we have to shine a light on the harm that's done to real people, and we have to do it at scale. So we have to do it. I'm doing it obviously here in Cook County, and Chicago media market reaches a lot of places, including in Wisconsin, Michigan, and other places, okay? But we have to do this all over the country, and we have to do it in those vulnerable in those districts with vulnerable Republicans. That's the first thing. Secondly, I still think we have to support and pursue litigation with regard to these issues, both inside and outside Congress. Third, we have to use our votes. It's not a fait accompli. It's not baked in the cake that the Republicans are going to succeed, for instance, in lifting the debt ceiling as part of this quote unquote big, beautiful bill that Donald Trump is trying to fashion in Congress. He may not be able to do the reconciliation package in time to meet the X date. That X date is when the government must lift the debt ceiling, in which case he may require Democrats to support lifting the debt ceiling. That's when we have leverage and we have to use it. Fourth and finally, we have to hold people accountable. Republicans have two choices. Either choose your constituents and their needs. Their needs include Medicaid, or choose Donald Trump, but you can't choose both. If you choose the latter, we're going to hold you accountable.
Well, Congressman, I have a quick follow-up. Oh yeah, sorry, I just had a quick follow-up to that. I mean, how do we, how do you respond to the direct Republican messaging here? Because you got Speaker Johnson coming out and saying, look, I mean, we get it. We're advocating for cutting Medicaid, but all we're doing is we just want to have work requirements. We don't want these lazy, able-bodied men playing video games all day, soaking up the healthcare spending we're doing. It's not like this big, broad-based cut that we're advocating for. I mean, that seems to be how Republicans have framed welfare cuts for the last 20, 30 years. Look, we just want to give it to the deserving poor. I mean, how do you respond to a framing like that?
I think two things. One, what we've seen time and again when they institute these work requirements is that the requirements, the paperwork is so burdensome that even people who are working, okay, the vast majority of people on Medicaid are actually working, by the way. Even the people who are working, as well as the people who might qualify for the exemptions, are not able to do so because the burdens, because of the paperwork and the regulations being so onerous, okay, that basically people get dropped off the rolls. This happens over and over again, to such an extent that the Republicans have scored, meaning they have projected that the cuts or the savings that they would realize from instituting these work requirements would be $880 billion or more, okay? Secondly, any cuts of that magnitude are not simply trying to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. Those are just cuts. Those are cuts of the meat.
Right.
That's the program itself.
Pisco, did you have a question? You were trying to jump in there a couple times.
Sure did. Congressman, I have a long-standing Twitter beef with Mike Lawler out of New York, and it's kind of difficult sometimes when you see the level of disinformation that's coming out for some of these congressional Republicans, where they'll maintain, for example, that because this budget resolution doesn't specifically state the line items that they're cutting, but everyone understands that to achieve their cuts, they need to get either to Medicare or Medicaid or some kind of health benefit to their constituents, they can maintain this posture of ambiguity that, oh, we're not going to cut Medicaid. We're actually not going to touch it. I guess my question for you is, how do you deal with that kind of what I would consider to be blatant bad faith? And how do you think the Democrats should approach targeting vulnerable members who are engaging in those kinds of tactics and really doing a disservice to their constituents, as you mentioned, who are some of the biggest recipients of these programs?
100%. What you do in those districts is you go to the hospitals, you go to the providers, you go to the patients, you go to the people that would be most affected by these cuts, and basically ask them, well, what's going to happen if these work requirements are put in place, or do you believe it's as ambiguous as Mike Lawler would paint it out to be? I guarantee you, dollars to donuts, they're going to say no. They will not. They will absolutely agree with the assertion, which I believe to be accurate, that these are cuts. It's going to be to the tune of $1 trillion or more to Medicaid alone, 200 to 300 billion for SNAP or food stamps, which my family was on. And so we just have to assert it and have real life people validate it, because they're the ones who are going to be most affected.
Can you explain the slippery game that Republicans are playing, where they're claiming they're not actually cutting any sort of like Medicare, Medicaid, but they necessarily have to?
100%. Okay, so they're playing a game on two levels, Adam. On one level, they're basically saying, as is it Pisco? As Pisco had said, that there's ambiguity in the budget instructions. It doesn't exactly say Medicaid, and therefore you should not insinuate that Medicaid's being cut. So that's one game, and I think the easy answer there is there's no way that the Energy and Commerce Committee can possibly cut $880 billion or $900 billion from its programs without cutting Medicaid. So that's one game, and that's the way to address that. The second game has to do with these work requirements. So basically, Mike Johnson and others will say, I'm not cutting Medicaid. We're just putting work requirements in, and thereby rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. And with that game, you have to basically say, look, every time you put this in place, it cuts people out of the program who are actually working, who are actually doing the things that we want them to be doing. Merely saying that you're not cutting them doesn't make it so. You are actually cutting them from the rolls. And by the way, it's the height of cynicism to assert otherwise when you're expecting $900 billion of savings from putting those requirements in place.
I was going to say, it seems to me that we have a unique opportunity in this moment because Trump seems to be slipping quite precipitously in his approval numbers. He's underwater now on the economy. That was by far his strongest asset during the election. He's even starting to become underwater on immigration. So they have on paper, they have the votes to pass these reconciliation packages, which only require a simple majority. However, if he starts really slipping in popularity and you have, 60 or so senators that are in targetable districts in 2026, it's not guaranteed that they are going to sign on to this if enough pressure is put on them. We saw during the election the crucial role that social media and media strategy played in that election, and Donald Trump's strengths, for example, in going into alternative media spaces. I wonder if you have any thoughts about broad strategy, messaging strategy from the Democratic Party to start taking these spaces more seriously and use that to your benefit.
100%. Two things. One, you're absolutely right. Trump is going underwater big time, especially because of these tariffs, which have caused kind of massive chaos. I'm getting constituents calling me all the time saying, I'm losing my retirement savings, my college savings. Small businesses are saying we're going to lay people off. We're going to be subject to retaliation by other countries. And so he's sinking. Now is the time to get on platforms like this one. I've never been on this platform, by the way. And so this is a first for me. And before I came on, I asked my team, like, what should I expect and so forth. And I wasn't really sure, but this is the time when we have to be, I respectfully say, I think we have to be everywhere. We have to be everywhere.
I agree.
Everyone, because I personally think that, quite frankly, I want to talk to people even who voted for Trump. I want to bring them back. We can't just leave anybody aside, in my opinion.
For example, we saw him, he went on Rogan, and that episode currently is sitting at like 50 million views. It was just really, really insane, just the amount of exposure he got in that space. And so it's encouraging to see it's not just you, but other Democrats are starting to take the space like much more seriously. I think that is for sure required moving forward. It's just this essential part of American politics now.
I agree 100%. I think that if I can just say one last thing on that, I think if you are not prepared to go into these spaces and talk to people, how are we going to convince people to do something different than they're otherwise doing right now? If we aren't willing to engage in discomfort, then we're going to be stuck in the minority.
Congressman, I want to express a frustration with you as someone who is, talking to the people, talking to very online individuals. I was incredibly proud when House Democrats stood up and essentially with one voice, except for one vote, I believe it's Representative Golden, voted against the continuing resolution, which really wasn't a clean CR that was proposed by the House Republicans. And what happened in the Senate afterwards was incredible. It made me apoplectic. It made me feel like people weren't using possibly the leverage that you said was needed to be used, for example, with the debt ceiling fight that's going to be coming up. Do you think that we should have fought harder in that moment? Do you think it was a mistake?
I do. I respectfully say, look, obviously I voted no in the House. I wish that had also happened in the Senate. I also think that we needed to plan in advance so that we weren't in a situation where, basically Schumer decided, okay, well, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. But to me, now we have notice. We know what's going to happen in the next several months. So, shame on us if we repeat this and we kind of back ourselves into a corner again. we've got to exert that maximum pressure, which I think Hutch was alluding to before, especially on those Republicans. I believe there are some Republicans that are gettable, but we're not going to find out unless we put the pressure on right now.
Well, the margins are so slim. You only need a few. So yeah.
Correct.
Anyways, Econoboy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Congressman, what's your sense? Something that we've kind of talked about on this show a lot is that there seems to be, like, at the very least, when it comes to Democrats, like we saw this when Joe Biden was in office. We saw, Manchin and Sinema causing a lot of trouble for like the Biden agenda. But it seems like, generally speaking, Democrats are able to pass things pretty consistently. Look, I mean, we're not going to get everything we want. We'll make compromises within the caucus. But it seems like with Republicans historically, I mean, there was something going around a while ago, which was like every single government shutdown is when the House is controlled by Republicans because they can't get their shit together, basically. And so there's so many tensions within the Republican Party. You got Elon Musk saying certain things, Trump saying certain things. The margin's so thin that people like Massey, who seems to want to just literally abolish the welfare state altogether, he could actually be very, very relevant. What's your sense with this upcoming budget fight? I mean, do we expect that Republicans are going to be able to stick together? Are the moderates really, really scared about actually doing a lot of these deep cuts? I mean, it's just a framework as of right now. But what's kind of your forecast heading into the summer?
I think, first of all, I don't think the Republicans in the Senate are comfortable with this $1.5 trillion spending target. As you know, their spending target was like $4 billion. So, I mean, by many orders of magnitude, their expectations, I think, are much different than whatever people are advertising right now. So that's point one. Point two, yes, I think that within the House, I do think that wrangling the moderates, wrangling the 30 to 60 members who are in districts where I think this would be a horrible vote to cast, getting them to fall in line with the president is not going to be simple. And that's why I think we got to peel them off. We got to do everything we can to peel them off. We can't just assume that they're going to kind of walk the plank for the president and lose. I mean, look, politically, they're going to, I believe it's suicide for them to vote for $1.5 trillion in safety net costs and $1 trillion in Medicaid cuts. It just doesn't make sense. One thing I just forgot to mention, like, whole healthcare systems are going to collapse if this actually happens because, so much of the revenue stream comes from Medicaid that even affluent healthcare systems, certainly rural healthcare systems, they will not be able to exist with these types of cuts.
I have a question about the day after a hopeful victory for House Representatives, House Democrats in the next election. Let's say that the Dems take the House. What's on your dream list in terms of assuming the subpoenas are going to be complied with and that the administration, is going to be good faith about, requests for information, document production. But if you had to, pick a dream list of things that you'd want to find out from this administration, get to the bottom of stuff, what would that be? And where would you start?
I start with Elon Musk and Doge. I think that they are a walking, talking conflict of interest. I think that we don't have a good sense right now of all the bad things they've done. But suffice it to say, they've done some bad things, and we got to figure that out, especially with regard to our data. I think that is just like very high on my constituents' list of concerns. Number two, I think we got to we absolutely have to throw a monkey wrench into their plans with regard to gutting the agencies. These layoffs, these rolling freezes, the targeting of employees at these agencies has got to stop. It's harming regular people every day. I'm talking to seniors every day who can't get someone on the line to fix their problems with their Social Security checks at the Social Security Administration. They can't get online either because the website keeps crashing. The people who were supposed to maintain it are gone. I think in terms of the third thing in the wish list, I think we have to do everything we can, and I might not be saying this properly, but we need the rule of law back. We need the freaking rule of law. And I just got off a phone call with someone talking about the Kilmar Abrego Garcia case, and I get it. Like, that is an issue that maybe some people don't want to talk about, but what it's pointing at is it's really pointing at whether or not the executive branch can A, defy court orders, okay, and B, which is very dangerous, whether they can end up deporting people who are legally here, including potentially citizens of America, undesirables to them, people that are targets of their political schemes. And we got to stop that. We got to defund it. We got to do whatever we can to block that.
Well, if I could just comment real quick on something, I feel like Trump's hubris is a huge strength for you guys. My sense of things is that Trump surrounds himself, as particularly in this administration, at least in his first administration, there were some people that you might call grown-ups. I was ideologically opposed to them, but some people within that administration, many of them had principles. This time around, he seems to have surrounded himself entirely with yes men. I am sure that they are shielding him from some of the really terrible polling that's been coming out. It's kind of astonishing how much he fumbled, both immigration and the economy, and it seems to be getting worse and worse every day. And so 100%. I think that gives you guys just so much ammunition in this moment. His own hubris, I think, will be his downfall. But I do want to say, I do want to ask you on when you talk about restoring the rule of law, I think all of us and my fellow panelists here, we interact with a lot of younger voters, and there is something to me that's quite alarming. There's a growing trend of what we call doomerism, which is basically just pessimism. A lot of people are losing faith in our institutions. They look at Donald Trump and they think Teflon Don, this is a guy that never suffers any real consequences for his actions. I'm curious what message you have for younger people that are losing faith in institutions. What do you do in your personal life to instill a sense of optimism? I feel like optimism has to be at the core of your politics. Otherwise, I don't really understand why you would engage.
Wow, this is a great question. I happen to have 3 kids, and 2 of them, we have almost 20, almost 16, almost 9. And so I think about this a lot, and I think that Washington is not necessarily the place to be to kind of draw optimism from right now, to be honest. I think it's much more at the local level. I think what we see every day in terms of what's happening at the local level to, when people are kind of have their backs against the wall, sometimes like really great acts of heroism, kindness, humility, generosity come to the forefront. And people step up to help their community and their neighbors. I think that's what's happening right now, honestly. And those are the people that I kind of highlight to my kids and other young people, also other young people, their acts, because I feel like young people today have a sense of kind of a noble sense of mission that in some ways maybe even exceeds what we might expect of people who are under tremendous pressure. I mean, remember, this is a generation that's now growing up with the aftermath of COVID. They have tremendous problems with housing accessibility. They have tremendous problems with debt. They have tremendous problems now with an administration that doesn't necessarily accept everyone for who they are. Mm-hmm. And yet, despite that, you see just a lot of grace, a lot of uncommon, but unspoken heroism at a level that is profound. But they serve in silence, and so I try to point that out. I try to recognize it. I try to bring it to people's attention wherever I can.
To build on what Hutch was talking about, it's the same phenomenon as when someone like Elon Musk starts to undermine like Social Security or USAID or any institution. And then after they undermine it, they can endlessly justify tearing that institution down. It's the same thing as when young people are like, well, these institutions don't work for me anyways. How am I supposed to care if they're torn down? Sorry. How do you approach that when it relates to Elon Musk. So when Elon starts to strip away, obviously Social Security is an easy sell, but US aid, something that doesn't affect people on a daily basis, how do you message to them that, hey, this does affect you? There are long-term effects, even if you feel like these institutions aren't serving you at this moment.
So I think we should not be defensive about it at all. We got to say it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But the way that he goes about trying to quote unquote fix it makes the problem a lot worse. Now, with regard to Social Security and Medicare, I think fundamentally they work as institutions for a lot, like hundreds of millions of people, really. But can we improve it? Absolutely. And we as Democrats should never be the ones who are defending the status quo. We should always be agitating for improvement and trying to figure out how do we do that in a sensible way, not a chaotic one.
What did you think of Bernie Sanders showing up to Coachella? I mean, that's one way you talk about the youth voter, the young voter. I think it's pretty cool and awesome that we're seeing actually a lot of energy among some members of Congress. And it's not just them. I think that there are other members of Congress who are able to go to these spaces and sometimes go to the culture. But yeah, so what do you think about the energy that some of these rallies, some of these town halls? Would you go to Coachella? But yeah, talk a little bit about that.
I love it. I think you got to go everywhere. You got to go where the people are. You got to go where you can engage people. I think that whenever you have a chance to get real feedback and also to voice your opinions and get feedback on those, I think that that's a good thing. So I applaud that.
Well, we're talking about the importance of engaging with young people. There's a really interesting challenge, I think, right now for the Democratic Party. I've seen some specific breakdowns of Gen Z. There's a divide within Gen Z. For the Gen Z kids that were in high school when COVID was happening, they are overwhelmingly Trumpy by modern standards. I say overwhelmingly, I mean like plus 12. And then for Gen Z, I call them kids, but young adults that were graduated after or before COVID hit, they're much more progressive. It's like plus 6 or plus 7 Democrat. That is a really interesting novel phenomenon that's occurring here. It's typically been conventional political wisdom for decades that younger people were just much more progressive. I think it is because of these alternative media spaces. I think they were stuck at home and they were turning on their phones and they were seeing Rogan and Andrew Tate and, and on and on and on. And it's going to be really hard to claw them back.
Hutch, I read the exact same thing. And I was thinking the same thing as well, except that I think we Democrats need to be in those spaces now. We need to kind of make our voices heard. The other thing I want to just say substantively, I'm sorry to geek out a little bit. I was in Congress during that whole time. I've now been in Congress for 5 terms, and I think those lockdowns that were happening at that time, I think affected young people in a way that we're only now beginning to grasp. It was so profound and it was too much. We as Democrats have got to learn. Okay, I'll just be honest. We got to be humble about this. That the lockdowns were too much, and it had an impact on my kids. It had an impact in terms of mental health, social, emotional health, whatever you want to call it, in so many people, and people are resentful about that too. And also, we're dealing with those deficits, by the way, those educational deficits, social, emotional deficits, even today, not to mention the health deficits associated with that whole horrible situation.
I've experienced this.
I think that's a great point. Oh, go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say I experienced this with a lot of friends, and basically what I'd see is that throughout COVID, everyone sort of puts up a bubble around them, and then after COVID, you have to make an intentional effort to tear that bubble around. But as the male loneliness epidemic is exacerbated, you start to turn to these alternative media sources.
Yes.
So every young male has a problem with dating. You go online, you try to figure out like, what's my problem with dating? You get advice from Andrew Tate. Okay, I want to go work out. Most young men want to go and work out. Then you get sucked into this like Maha feed or whatever the hell. So it feels like after the male loneliness epidemic started to spike, you can see it throughout COVID. People are just, like Hutch said, and like the representative said, just stuck in their algorithm.
That's a great point. I think that's exactly right. And I think that I'd just be curious, Adam, since you brought that up, do you have an idea? Do you have any ideas for how do you kind of undo that being stuck in that algorithm, so to speak?
In the broadest sense possible, the Democratic Party just needs to be a bit punchier. And I like your candid style. That's a good example. But there are some times when we just kind of seem like losers, not to be like too candid, but I swear there are times when the Democratic Party feels finger waggy. You can't really be too cool. And I get that that's a lot of online stuff, but I think a start would be, I don't know, changing the way that we message around stuff. That's like the vaguest answer possible, but we all kind of feel it.
To piggyback off of what he's saying, I think like I personally really enjoy seeing elected. We don't want to take up too much of your time. They did say that you had 30 minutes, so if you need to leave, then that's fine as well. But I just wanted to touch on that and say that I am enjoying seeing elected representatives use curse words, because I think that the times have changed. They have shifted.
Hell yeah.
Gen X and millennial, we curse a lot, very openly, and sometimes it's organic and sometimes it's not. I don't necessarily think that people who don't normally swear should force it, but that's just one small thing that I think actually does make a difference.
Can I ask you? This is the way I perceive it. Okay, Hutch. Like, I think you just gotta be yourself. I mean, if you use a swear word, or you, I think it's mainly to convey emotion and to be like to emphasize something. And if that's what you need to do it, then do it. Sometimes I feel like, I'll just be honest with you, since you're asking me to be candid. Sometimes I feel like some of my colleagues just use it for the sake of it. Sorry, I corrected myself. But they use it just to be cool, and I don't like that. Yeah. I'm not like into that. Like, we don't need to say a 4-letter word just for effect or whatever,
And not every elected representative needs to use that language. Like you said, if it's not organic, if you don't believe that you sound better than doing it, obviously don't force it. I want to see
Chuck Schumer dropping F-bombs.
Be yourself.
Good luck with that.
Well,
Congressman, go ahead. Sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt. I think there's a delay on my end.
Yeah, no, you're good. I was going to say, Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. We've taken up your half hour. I was going to say, if there's a way for people to get involved, either with the party at large or in your district, what are some things that you can point people towards on the ground right before you leave, if we want to get involved and try to help the party out?
Okay. I think this is going to sound really corny, but I'm sorry I have to say it. Like, find a cause or a person that you believe in, okay? There are a lot of good people out there running for office. There are a lot of good causes that need good people to help to propel them forward. And work on that, with the notion of, is this something that I could be doing and I don't notice the time passing? If it is, that's what you should be doing right now. And that we need as many people engaged in whatever aspect of this that they find kind of matches their talents as well as their passion right now, because I don't know, America's worth fighting for. And I'm an immigrant. I came to this country when I was 3 months old. My parents came here because of the ideals of this country. And they're under threat, and we got to fight. There's no other choice. You either give in or fight. We have to fight.
And that means going on a plane to El Salvador.
Wait, does that mean coming back, Pisco?
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, no. We appreciate your time, Congressman.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Enjoyed it.
Well, there it was, guys. Congressman Krishnamoorthi from Illinois, apparently in Adams' neck of the woods. It was really cool to have him on. There's more where that came from. All right, we got Adam on the show too, for goodness sake.
What's up?
The mock.
Couldn't really introduce yourself, Adam, with the congressman joining. But I guess now, if you want to introduce yourself to the chat, I mean, who are you? Why are you here?
I'm a creator that has followed all of you guys before I even got into creation, which is interesting, in different stages of my life. So, I mean, Hutch, I used to watch you in the Optic days a bunch. Definitely would root for you guys at all of the MLG tournaments. And then Pisco, yeah, like definitely. But Pisco, I used to watch you on Destiny stream a lot, and then same thing with Econoboy. Your videos have been popping up my feed for a while. I run a YouTube channel of my own. I used to go to MAGA rallies during the campaign season, debate with them. I work with the company Midas Touch.
I want to talk to you about those rallies, man, because you are like, I find the way that you carry yourself at those rallies in your interactions with MAGA really impressive. Like you stay very composed and you're very assertive in the way that you talk to them. I tried it one time at a Trump rally and I was so nervous the whole time. Did you have to get over the jitters initially and did you kind of get used to it?
Yeah. I was super nervous before the first few. And then after the first one went viral, I remember being extra nervous going back to the second one because it was in the same state, Iowa. And I thought I was going to get the shit beat out of me. Like I genuinely thought one of the Trump supporters from the first one was going to come kill me or something, but that didn't happen.
Well, you're like 7'5", man. You're not a small.
Yeah.
Small
No,
kid.
I'm like 5'11". I'm skinny though. And the thing is that actually helps me. So my baby face, I think helps me. You walk up to someone and it's like I'm talking to my aunt or my uncle. Now Hutch rips out the vape now that the congressman's gone. Sorry.
So I was vaping the whole time, bro.
You know he's against vape, right? He's one of the most like dedicated persons against vape in Congress, right?
Stop.
100%. I was gonna ask him about it, but I didn't want to put you on blast.
I didn't see you
Are
do
you
it.
serious
Yeah.
right now? No, why didn't you
100%.
text me? What is wrong with you?
No,
Oh my
look
God.
bad.
I didn't want to put you on blast. I was considering you, Hutch. Yeah,
He
but no,
actually
he's
just
very
DM'd
against
me.
vape.
He DM'd me and asked for your address, Hutch. so
Oh
you
my
make a
goodness.
knock on
Wait,
it.
so he like wants to ban vapes?
He wants to do some stuff with vapes, guys. Hey, listen.
Regulate 'em.
Don't hate him, all right? I didn't bring it up. I didn't want him to make the vape. This is all about getting the youth involved, and I didn't want to put Hutch on blast. And so
Sorry,
I
it
didn't
was a
mean to.
tactical decision.
That's
I didn't
actually
mean to call you
incredible. Okay.
Wait, so Adam,
Yeah.
how does that work? I mean, do you just I guess you just like show up at the rally and you're just like, hey, who wants to talk to me? And you just kind of like line people up, or I mean, do you have to have some sort of permission, or how does
Bro,
all
he
that work?
just struts around, just looking all fucking confident, man. He
Listen.
he just walks in there and just owns it.
You have to act like you're supposed to be there. Literally, it's like the #1 rule. Like you have to act like you're meant to be there. And we've been challenged by the people that like work at the rallies, and we're like, we're supposed to be here, blah blah. But yeah. So the process at first was really awkward to figure out, and it doesn't get any less awkward. But you basically walk through the line and you ask people, "Do you want to talk about the president?" Sometimes I would word it in a way, "Do you want to talk about the president's historic rally?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, history, baby." And then you walk up, you got to know what they want to hear. They want to hear about the historic rally or whatever. So then, yeah, what's up?
Go for it. Sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt you guys. I think there's a delay.
There is a little delay.
No, it's all good.
I'm gonna refresh.
Sweet. No, but then you walk up. Most people say no. They're like, "What is this for?" We used to say this is for my college project. That was before I had the channel for the first video. But then we just say it's for a YouTube video, and then we get a verbal release or verbal like confirmation.
Right.
So they
Yeah,
say
yeah,
like,
yeah.
we're like, "Hey, can you say your name and say the line? I'm okay with you recording me." And
Okay.
that's basically legally binding if they say that on camera. Like yeah.
What
Yeah,
would you
yeah,
say
I've
has
heard.
been the most aggressive situation that you faced? Have you actually had someone that wanted to physically fight you?
Yeah, there's a few. The Mike Lindell one was wild. I don't know if you guys have seen that one, but I'm standing in a crowd debating Mike Lindell, and there's like 30 MAGA around me, literally like screaming at me.
I did
"Libtard."
watch that one. Yeah.
Like libtard. That one wasn't really that like crazy, but then this one dude grabbed my hand one time and tried to like yank me forward. No one really gets violent, surprisingly. I mean, knock on wood. It's really interesting because I went through a little bit of cognitive dissonance as I go through these rallies because you argue with MAGA supporters online and it's like, oh, these people are so vile. And then you talk to any single MAGA, you talk to most MAGA people in person and it's your sweet aunt or uncle. And
Right.
of course, I have family members that are like this, so it's not that crazy to me, but it's just insane how like almost every MAGA supporter, most of them are just very nice people. But these,
Yeah.
Bro, do you consider yourself part of this like new generation of Gen Z libs? Like, do you consider yourself part of the same quote movement as the Deans and the Harrys and these kinds of people? Or do you think that there's distinct because you're with Midas and you're kind of doing a different thing?
the distinctness is that I'm on YouTube, so we have kind of different audiences, but I'm good friends with all of them. I'm good friends with Dean Parker. I'm good friends with Harry and Chris, and they're not friends anymore, by the way. I don't know if you guys follow that drama, but Dean and Parker aren't friends with Harry and Chris anymore.
I did see
broke
that.
up?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not really my place to speak on it, but there was like a whole controversy and stuff. But yeah, I like all of them. I'm really cool with all of them, and we have pictures of us all like at events and stuff. I love them.
Wait, was that what it was like? The one guy who killed Osama bin Laden's like, you guys are all my concubines.
Yeah, I wasn't in that photo. I wasn't in that photo, but yeah, we have,
Do you guys remember that?
Yeah.
I
That
do,
shit
yeah.
was so stupid.
Yeah.
the guy who killed Osama bin Laden posted a photo of my twink friends. They're actually straight. But they look like twinks. And he was like, "I want you to be my concubine."
Bro, that's a goated tweet. I can't believe, and he doubled down on it too after Trump won. He's like,
Yeah.
"Looks like you guys are I don't. I guess just come out of the closet." Why are there no like women of your generation doing what you're doing? Like, why is it just these young twink males?
Dude, we've asked that multiple times. You know, really quickly, it's funny. We were all in DC one time after that White House thing, and we were like, you know what would really anger MAGA? You know what would piss them off? If we actually just kissed. If we all just posted, I don't know. We were like, it was obviously
gay porn.
It was like, you know what would make him really upset if we all just started making out, you know?
Like that, we would prove them so wrong. It was obviously a complete joke, but yeah, we've wondered that too. We wonder if it's like almost a self-selection thing where like white males have enough confidence and white males only have enough confidence and like the ability, the freedom to try it out. I don't know. We've wondered that same thing. There has to be some rational explanation as to why it's white males with the same
socially determined to be white male dominated, I'm sure. But I don't know. I mean, I'm sure with time you'll see more people. I see a lot of young women, or like relatively speaking, younger women in more like the traditional media space, kind of like coming to.
What does that mean, relatively speaking?
Well, I mean, it seems like, for instance, if I think of like, oh, who are like the anchors that are really killing it? Like, I think of like a Caitlin Collins type. Now, I don't know if she's like a Gen Z, or I don't know how old she is, but
no, she's not. She's like,
no, yeah. But I'm saying
ancient,
like,
bro. No, she's like 31.
Yeah.
Wow, you guys.
She might be Gen Z then, right?
To get women
No.
is to shit on them for being old.
I'm joking. She's literally really young. She's 31 and she's not Gen Z. She's really good though.
Did you know she used to? I think her first job doing news was with the Daily Caller. Yeah, she was like doing she was doing like Obama trutherism stuff, and so her evolution has been wild because I honestly think she's like one of the most impressive White House press pool people. Like she's, especially with Trump, who's just so outwardly antagonistic towards her. Every time she opens her mouth, his face just gets like so irritated so fast.
But he knows the dynamic he's playing into when he's like, any questions? Not you. Not to say he's like intentionally. He knows when he's combative with her that it's like a funny vibe.
But she still manages to like assert herself and ask the questions, which is like, that's like the skill that you need if you're going to do that job.
Except for that one CNN town hall where he kind of like rolled over her every time. I don't know if you remember that.
I thought she did a decent job pushing back, but like they packed the crowd with like Trump people, and so they were like,
that was the problem. And then he couldn't really,
like no, they literally did. I think he said like they all have to be Trump people, and that was the only way he was going to agree to the CNN thing. But I wanted to ask, like, you came up during a really interesting time. It seems like you started to really catch steam like during the Biden era. Which was a particularly difficult time, I think, for like left-wing content creators, because I was fine defending him on the merits, but he's just not a easily defendable guy because he's just so prone to gaffes and he's pretty old, and you know he would say and do kind of goofy things quite a bit, and it just felt like I was on the back foot the whole time, like during the Biden era. But you managed to like carve a space out during a really kind of challenging time and make a name for yourself despite that. And I imagine during the Trump era, I assume your numbers are going kind of nuts with Trump, right? He's like a content machine.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. Oh yeah, totally. And like the thing is, I do kind of miss the on the ground content. And I think that's part of the reason that I was able to get my footing so easily is because I had like, I don't know if I've told you guys how I got into this. I could run through. It's really quick. In like 5th grade, or the channel that I post on now, basically, I started when I was 7 years old, and I used to make these dumb Minecraft videos or like Call of Duty cutcoms, literally Call of Duty cutcoms. And then I learned how to edit really effectively. I used to also debate my teacher in like 5th grade, and he kicked me out of class one time because I debated him like gay marriage or whatever. And then I stopped doing all of that. Once I graduated, I combined my skills in like editing, debating, or whatever, all into one cohesive series. And that was during the Biden era. And I think me going to Trump rallies and having this experience and like a little bit of production, being able to edit these debates together, that made it easier because then I was able to kind of put Republicans on the back foot. I remember one question I always used to ask, which I can't go back and watch these videos because it aged so poorly. I was like, what makes you think that Trump can beat Biden this year when he lost to him last election? That it aged so, but that question
that was Josiah, dude. No, Josiah's whole shtick at the end of every video, and I feel so bad that he's not here to defend himself, was like, Guys, and let's not forget that Donald Trump is an electoral loser. He lost in 2018. He lost in 2020. He lost in 2022. He lost in 2023.
At the time, he was being truthful, though. At the time, that was the truth.
True,
like,
true.
He had been a drag on the party largely.
I feel a little bad for him because that was he had that down to a science, and he can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Well, we should probably delve into some crazy shit this week. It feels like the Abrego Garcia case is just getting worse and worse and worse for this administration. They were so desperate today that they trucked out a grieving mother as a proverbial human shield. Her daughter had been, I think, violently murdered by an illegal immigrant, but it had nothing to do with the Abrego Garcia case. It was just a transparent attempt to smear this guy by pointing to a completely different case. I mean, what are you guys' thoughts on this?
It's the Family Guy sketch. It's like literally the Family Guy sketch where Lois is like 9/11 and like just distracting from the obvious fucking corrupt shit that they're doing. And yeah, they're doing that. They're also like repackaging the same shit that we already knew about, which are the basis of his allegation that he's a member of MS-13, which, by the way, is irrelevant. Even if he were, it's still authoritarian to send him in violation of the law and not bring him back. But they're repackaging this police report and trying to pretend that they've like uncovered new evidence with respect to that police report. And so they're pulling out all the stuff, but they got nothing.
Talk about the police officer, bro. Look at that. The information
the police
that came
officer.
out.
So this guy's a Boy Scout. He writes the report, right? The report is, it's not that he knows anything about Abrego Garcia being MS-13. He basically says, I talked to an anonymous person who is definitely very reliable that says that he's MS-13 based in New York, even though he never lived in New York. And the fact that he wears Chicago Bulls clothes, that makes him more likely to be MS-13. That's based on the report that this guy writes, this one cop guy writes. So we're all going off of a report that one cop writes that is based on hearsay, anonymous hearsay, and pure speculation about the Chicago Bulls stuff. And it turns out this Boy Scout cop at the same time was secretly and in violation of either the law or the policies of the police, leaking confidential information to a prostitute that he was fucking. And he was suspended because of that. So this is already like a disgraced cop who writes this. A week later
after he wrote the report.
And so basically, and by the way, the report is riddled with errors. It says that they're like picking people up for murder, which they were like arrested for loitering outside of a Home Depot. It's all fucking crazy. And so everyone is basing this allegation of MS-13 on this report written by this disgraced cop. And when they released him in 2019, the Trump administration released this prominent MS-13 person in 2019. And so you're going to tell me that you knew he was an MS-13 member enough in that time period to put him behind, like not revoke his bond. But then when he was let free by the immigration judge, who was a member of the Trump administration, as executive branch official, you didn't do anything. You just let this prominent 13 person just free on the country. It makes no fucking sense. And that's why they have to do this fucking whole routine with the mother.
Trump's ICE were initially they had initiated removal proceedings. It went to a judge. The judge, what is it called? A removal of withdrawal order or something like that. It's actually
withholding of removal. It is a status. It's a higher standard than asylum. The reason why there's difference is because asylum has a time bar. You have to apply within 1 year. And so they've said, okay, you didn't apply within a year, you're not going to get asylum, even if you have a really good case. So we have this other status for people who are really at risk. And it's not as good as asylum because you're not going to get a green card, but you have to show more, but you're going to get withholding from removal. We can't deport you to this country. That's what he got, which is, so he would have got asylum if he had applied within a year, basically. But
they
he just didn't
deported
do
him
it.
to
And
one country that he wasn't supposed to be deported to. But Pisco, I was giggling this morning. Can I cuss on here?
Yeah.
Because I saw you just own the fuck out of Tim Pool.
Out of Tim Pool,
It was so good, dude. He didn't know. So you clarified that an immigration judge is part of the executive branch. He thought it was part of the judicial branch, right? Can you clarify like what happened there?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm like waking up. It's 7 o'clock. I'm feeling good. I'm having some coffee. You know, I'm about to record something with Joanna, like a podcast that we're doing, and I just see Tim Pool put out a tweet to say something like, "How can a judge order withholding?" I'm like, dude, of course they can. It's the law. Like, of course the judge can enforce the law. And he's like, where in the Constitution does it say that the judicial branch can step on the toes of the executive branch, bro, and the legislative branch? I'm like, first of all, they're not stepping on the toes of the legislative branch because this is a statute of Congress that provides for withholding. Second of all, you don't know what the Executive Office of Immigration Review is. This judge is not an Article 3 judge. He's not part of the judiciary branch. they answer to the attorney general. They're part of the executive branch.
Administrative
So,
judge.
completely fucking owned, completely fucking just cooked, utterly cooked. He's trying to make this profound point about separation of powers, not realizing that IJs are members of the executive branch. It's fucking hilarious.
So what happens then when an executive branch there's an internal dispute like that?
Yeah, so all they would have to do is just follow the law again and go to the immigration judge and produce their additional evidence to that, like the withholding conditions aren't apparent anymore, or that there's another reason to deport them to a safe third country. They could have done a lot of stuff. They still have to follow the law. And I'm guessing that if the IJ didn't rule what Trump wanted, he probably could fire them. Okay, so it's an executive branch official that is subject to removal by the attorney general or the president of the United States. So I'm sure he could have fucked with it in other ways to get the result that he wanted. There could have been some additional relief that maybe that he could get in the actual courts, the federal court systems, but we weren't there yet. And it's just funny that Tim Pool was this again. It's okay if you haven't finished high school or whatever, but he just speaks out of turn in all these situations, and he tries to. His favorite thing is jumping on people who just don't have the facts ready. But he puts himself and makes himself vulnerable to a lot of attacks for people who actually know what the fuck is going on, and so that was very delicious.
So how does this? Go ahead, Adam.
I was gonna say you did really well in your panel, but his debate style is very gaslighty. I don't know if that's the word, but he will say something, then he'll gaslight you a second later, and you're like, "What the fuck?"
Say the opposite. Yeah, no, he'll say the exact opposite 5 seconds later, and it happened at least 5 times in our discussion. Yeah.
At least, if
You're
not a dozen
right.
times. But so how does this play out?
I believe in the Constitution. I don't believe in the Constitution. It's an insurrection. It's not an insurrection. So it's just constant. Sorry, Hutch.
No, I was just going to ask. So how does this play out? The judge, my understanding is, was it the immigration judge that said that there was a risk of contempt if the administration doesn't take steps to purge it? Is that what's going on?
So that's a different situation.
Okay.
That's the Alien Enemies Act deportation, where Trump actually won on appeal to the Supreme Court there on procedural issues, the habeas issue, right? So but in part of that holding, they said all these people have due process, procedural due process. And that was unanimous from every single person in the Supreme Court. That was the one that Trump won. But just because he won doesn't mean that he didn't still violate the judge's order with respect to the not turning the planes around. Remember when they sent all these people on planes and there was an order in place and they sent them anyway. Yeah. And so Judge Boasberg found that there was probable cause for contempt. That basically means he's found that they're going to be in contempt. And he said, you have the following options. You can try to purge the contempt, which one way that you could do that I'm telling you right now, is to assert that you're a custodian over these individuals once more. And so assert the fact that you have control over these individuals. That's one way you could purge the contempt, or prosecute the people who did contempt and bring a case, or I'll hire a prosecutor. If you're unwilling to do that, I will hire a prosecutor to do it. And this is the one specific exception where the judicial department is able to prosecute a crime, is only in the exception of enforcing their own judicial power with contempt. So that they weren't able to do that with the Mayor Adams case, remember? So Mayor Adams, they dropped that case. People were saying they should hire an independent prosecutor to come do the case anyway. You can't, and the court said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to step on the toes of the executive branch. The one area where you can do it is for contempt.
And does the judge have the power to send U.S. Marshals to make arrests if he decides to move forward with the contempt thing?
Under the law, yes. But at that point, the question is, what are the people with guns going to do?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a similar thing going on with the NLRB. It seems where Trump tried to fire that administrative judge or administrative board member, I should say. And the court basically said, look, you didn't follow the proper procedures. And so this person's been temporarily reinstated. But now they're going in and they're trying to say, and I think this is also in part has to do with their case on independent agencies, where they're trying to basically say, look, I get it. There's these administrative judges and things like this, immigration, the labor board, even the Federal Reserve or whatever. But none of that shit matters. If they're part of the executive branch, we can basically just do whatever we want. Right. And so there's some potentially very scary implications. Pisco, I don't know if you've read much about the court dynamics. Some of the stuff that I've read about, it seems like although of course, justices are only originalists and they're only textualists and they don't have any personal opinions about anything. Of course, that's true. I have heard that, oftentimes you'll see the courts and John Roberts, who they seem to have this mindset of oh, this guy thinks he can fucking bully us. Well, we're going to show him what for. And they try to kind of almost tilt their decision against the administration to try and sort of rebalance the power situation between the two branches. That's just some of the reading that I've been doing. Like, how real is that? Is John Roberts really? Is it real that he's actually really angry that Trump is trying to sort of obfuscate the Supreme Court? I mean, how do you think this will play out?
Yeah, so if you guys watched my, I'm just being tongue in cheek, but if you watched my appearance on Crystal Ball and Sager's show called Breaking Points, we talked a little bit about this. Is why do you think that Roberts is playing some kind of inside baseball, some kind of game here? And the reason that I think that is that there is actual reporting that that's his state of mind, that he is concerned specifically about the integrity of the court and its orders being followed. And so there's direct reporting that that's his state of mind. Then, of course, just the fact that he's like issuing public statements, right? A public statement saying in response to something the president said directly, right? So imagine that. The Chief Justice sees something that the president said and issues a public statement in response saying, hey, don't say to impeach Boasberg because that's not the right way to do things. And also these opinions, how they're written, seem like they're always in that vein that you're kind of suggesting there. I think that is very much at issue here. I think that it's my intuition the court's a little spooked here. They're a little spooked at how a really authoritarian Trump is acting. The fact that we're not seeing separate statements from Alito, separate statements from Clarence Thomas. They're almost always writing separate statements whenever there's like an immigration case. Even in the case of Pennsylvania versus Texas, this is the election fraud case that went directly to the Supreme Court under its original jurisdiction. They wrote separately. Alito wrote separately to say that we would have taken the case, at least to hear it, right? So it says something to me that we're not seeing those statements. I think that they're probably a little spooked. And so I'm inclined to believe that they're trying to manage that relationship and to make sure the rule of law is followed.
I mean, it just seems bizarre. It's like, oh yeah, we had this whole opinion where we said that this guy was immune from substantially all prosecution, and all of a sudden he's acting like a dictator. I mean,
who could have guessed?
Who could have guessed this would happen? My name's John Roberts. I know I'm supposed to be a smart lawyer, member of the fucking Supreme Court, but who could have guessed such a thing would happen? How could this institution have crumbled under such a unforeseeable circumstance?
He should have been watching Mockler and Midas Touch. Midas. I fuck with Midas and few other news organizations, but I fuck hard with Midas because let me tell you, everyone else is a capitulator.
He fucks hard with Midas, bro.
a capitulator. Everyone else is a capitulator. And listen to me, it's so obvious when you look at the Washington Post, when you even look at the New York Times stuff, they pull their punches a little bit. Midas, when you go on Midas and you click on a Midas video, you're like, oh, the truth.
And they got that good legal shit too. You probably like their legal stuff. It's probably like catnip to you.
Yeah. I started with the legal stuff, but then I'm like, oh, these people are the one news organization that is actually saying it how it is, and they're not just doing this both sidesism bullshit. Even Caitlin Collins and the anchors on CNN, they will often do this both sidesism. And so I fuck with Midas, I fuck with the Mock.
I appreciate that, man. I have a question for you because I think I have some debates coming up about Garcia. Is it true? Is there any validity in the idea that the Trump admin is kind of playing like heads I win, tails you lose with the habeas petitions? Because there was this one where they said you can't file it prematurely, right? Like you're filing these way too early. They're not giving the chance. And then after someone's deported, they're saying this is way too late to file it. So are they putting people in these impossible positions where you can't really do either?
They're trying to. Yeah, they are trying to. So on the one hand, you'll have there's a concern on behalf of individuals that if they don't file quickly enough, they're going to throw them on planes and put them in El Salvador, where the government will claim we can't do anything because we don't have the power to tell Bukele to give them back. That's what you're seeing with Abrego Garcia, right? Now I'm referencing the Alien Enemies Act deportations. So Abrego Garcia is not an Alien Enemies Act deportation. That's what's a little bit tricky sometimes. He was deported under no apparent law, right? Like there's actually no basis of deportation to get to remove him. It's not done under the INA, and it's not done under the Alien Enemies Act. It was a pure lawless action. Yeah,
you were talking to that guy yesterday.
Based in any law.
He was like, it's illegal, not law.
It was, yeah, he's a fucking idiot, this guy. I was trying not to pick my battles a little bit there.
Illegal,
just,
but not
get
lawless?
stuck on the semantics. No, he was being like, lawless is not pursuant to any kind of authority, not just that you're wrong about it. And I could even see a case for that. But in this case, like they didn't deport him under any pretense of law. They just got rid of him, and they engaged in human trafficking, and they moved him to a dungeon. To answer your question more fully, go ahead.
No, you finished your thought. I thought you were finished up there.
To answer your question, there's an issue of if we don't get file in court fast enough, are we going to be able to have a remedy before the government starts claiming that there's no jurisdiction or there's no ability for the court to bring us back? So that's why the impetus is to start earlier, right, before you're deported. Because if you do it too late, the government's going to say you can't do it. But if you do it too early, then the government might raise an issue of standing, which is, do you actually have any injury right now? Because they're only supposed to hear cases or controversies where there's an actual injury that's redressable. And it's basically enough to show that you have like a really good chance of having your rights be infringed or having some kind of negative action. So in the case of anyone who's designated as an alien enemy, I think that there would be potentially enough standing, but I'm sure that they're making arguments that the injury or the threat is not concrete enough, in which case you have to wait until you're actually picked up before you file it, in which case it's just more bullshit, so your intuition is almost certainly correct. Mm-hmm.
Well, we were talking before about I don't know if you guys saw the same thing. There's really interesting polling because we've seen all this polling about Gen Z being Trumpier, but there was somebody did a deeper dive, and I don't know the pollster off the top of my head, but they broke it down, and it was older Gen Z are much more Democratic, younger Gen Z are much Trumpier, and people suspect it's because of COVID, and that makes sense kind of on its face. But this seems to be one of the issues that you could potentially maybe get some of those young people to come back, because like for a lot of young people, a lot of the policies and the issues that are being discussed don't really have like a direct impact on their lives in the way that it has on people's lives who maybe rely on Medicare or Social Security or more impacted by tax policy, et cetera, et cetera. And so emotional issues from my perspective seem to be something that riles up younger people. And this is just such an easy case to make that what they did to this guy is just horrific. And the polling indicates it's not popular. Like, also, if we dig deeper in on the polling on immigration, it's actually kind of deceptive because I assume we've all seen the polls about how like America broadly sort of supports mass deportations. It's something like 55%. I'll just make it up. When you dig in
it's
deeper,
similar to when you talk about like health. Yeah, exactly. Good.
Right. When you dig in deeper and you ask people, okay, do you support deportation or this specific? There was another deep dive on a different poll that I saw on my feed. And when you tell people, like, should we deport someone who's been here for 10 years but has never committed a crime and has kids here? It's overwhelmingly no. It's like negative 30 or something like that. And so I think a lot of Democrats are sort of gun shy about attacking the immigration issue because they're afraid of being seen as too dovish on the border. But I feel like this gives us a really unique opportunity, this particular case or these particular cases of these horrific actions by the administration to maybe appeal to younger people's stronger sense of empathy. What do you think, Adam? Or go ahead, Econo Boy.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the budget fight will be really interesting for this reason, right? Because I think that one of the interesting things about the current time that we're in is it feels like what the administration is doing is at the very least trying to set the legal groundwork to sort of very expeditiously just get rid of all of these people. And we've already seen a lot of transition problems. Like we've seen American citizens get caught up in the crosshairs. Like, what the fuck? They just put me in a jail for like a week and I'm from Wisconsin. Like, how did what the fuck's going on? We saw I think there was that one Canadian dual citizen who got caught up in a similar thing. We see permanent residents getting caught up, which I guess they maybe don't really care about permanent residents either. And that's one of the reasons why I think the budget fight is going to be so interesting is because I think that one of the reasons we can say that the network effects, and we haven't seen a lot of people be very, very, highly oppositional to this from like a broad-based perspective, like in a real sense. Let's say they might say they disapprove of it, but we see Trump's approval rating is relatively stagnant. Let's say he's basically returned to his 2017 norms. Is that they haven't had the resources to really go like completely full bore and start deporting millions of people a year. And so we'll see if the Republicans are actually willing to fund such a thing. Because I could imagine a scenario where maybe some moderate Republicans come out and they say, we don't want to give an extra $100 billion a year to ICE because, we care about the deficit, but really they're just like, we don't want to deal with the political consequences of your dumbass actually deporting millions of fucking people from this country, because that would be terrible for the economy. It'll be terrible for communities. And obviously it'd be terrible for our political chances. I mean, we're already seeing some sort of like breakthroughs, news stories like this, where you see like, oh, what the fuck? They deported my wife. Oh, they deported one of my good friends. I can't believe they did this. And it's like, well, no shit, dumbass. Like, what did you? Well, whatever. People are ignorant to the facts, I guess.
Wait. No, there's a new story. There was a U.S. citizen who was coming home. I think either she or he had it's a lawyer, it's an actual lawyer, has some link to Lebanon. Is it? Do you know what I'm talking about right now?
Yeah, not the
basically has
specifics,
family
but I
from
know
there
the
or
broad
something.
strokes. Yeah.
Yeah. And this U.S. citizen was basically like stopped and put into holding for hours and hours and hours. And eventually, under duress, the U.S. citizen, even though they're an attorney, let them like look over all their emails and everything in their possession, which I think is bullshit. I think you should have just stomached it in that moment. I say that as someone who, maybe I haven't gone through that specific situation, so maybe I would react differently. I'm just saying I wouldn't, break privilege or anything like that for that. But anyway, they come out of the meeting and talk to the reporters. They're like, I thought Trump would be better than this. I thought he would make things better. I'm just like, those are one of the instances where I get triggered, and I'm trying to be a little bit more gracious at times. I am bullying certain people, and I think bullying is a good tactic on certain people, 100%.
Adam, what do you think about
I'm like,
Adam, what do you think about the issue of immigration when it comes to young people? Do you think this could be a potential inroad to appeal to their sort of sense of decency? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it depends on how Democrats message around it. It's pretty obvious, like analysis, that when it comes to January 6th or the Trump trials, none of this really affects any of us on a day-to-day basis. But with tariffs, that affects us. Seeing the government overreach and deport people with like little to no due process, that's definitely scary. So at a time, we were talking about earlier with the congressman that Gen Z already is pretty anti-establishment, or we're pretty skeptical of institutions. So the fact that the government is going around basically kidnapping people, which is what every Democrat should be out there screaming, that like the government is going around deporting people with no due process. And that when you create a new class of people with no due process, you can put anybody in that class and they can't prove that they're innocent or whatever. So I mean, the Democrats need to be talking about this. I think Gen Z, it can reach them. Yeah, definitely. There's already a bunch of ICE memes online. Like, I don't know if you guys see, I don't know if memes are a good indicator, but when I'm scrolling through my feed and I see people like making fun of ICE and it's a whole like cultural thing, that shows me that people are paying attention to it.
The inroad there, I feel like, should be the Palestine situation and the fact that the government is going after people for free speech on campus, right? So these are your people, your brothers in arms, even if you think differently, right? These are your classmates, these are your professors that are, or sometimes they're just like random engineers and scientists and PhD students and that kind of shit who are being thrown out on the basis of either speech or some kind of pro forma violation.
There was a Harvard student that got kicked out for speeding tickets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
so I think there's an avenue there to.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's clear that the administration they don't give a shit. They just want to deport as many immigrants as possible. Because this is like you heard this like no, like it's all about the criminal immigrants, but then it's like, but just by being here illegally, they're criminals. No, we want to keep the high skilled immigrants, but then you hear about all these like engineering medical school professors getting in trouble because of their their green card permanent residence technically, right? And it's like, no, these guys are, this is Stephen Miller running the ship here, right? This is the Stephen Miller white nationalist immigration policy here. We can't really mince words on this. We've got a Nazi in the White House who wants to get rid of all the immigrants. And that's exactly what he's done. I mean, look, he even talked about how
Jewish Nazi.
Yeah, he even talked about before he took office, Stephen Miller did, about expanding the denaturalization process for U.S. citizens. So, I mean, there's a chance that even U.S. citizens who went through the full fucking decade-long legal process, even they are not innocent, according to this administration. It's an extreme scenario that we're going through here. Yeah,
my mother-in-law immigrated from Honduras 30 years ago, and she just got naturalized, I think, 2 years ago. So that was very scary to hear that. Yeah, for sure. There was some really infuriating reporting that came out. I'm so bad with the sources today, but there was some reporting today about how a lot of Democratic elected congressmen and women are afraid to tackle this current immigration stuff with Abrego Garcia and stuff like that, because they saw immigration as, arguably their weakest issue during the election year. Maybe the economy might be a little bit higher, but they're gun shy to pounce on this, which I think is just so myopic to just assume that there's just this. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say there was a fear of mine going into the Trump admin that the Trump admin was going to begin deporting people, a bunch of people, and then the Democrats were going to go onto the streets and begin protesting, and then they're going to be like, dude, we're deporting purely criminals. This person killed a mother and her kids. This person did this. And then we take the bait. So I think a lot of Democrats are scared to give more messaging to Trump's immigration. Like if they're always going out there and talking about, look how many people Trump is deporting, I don't think it has to be quite that way. Show how reckless and sloppy and illegal it is. But also, I had one more point, but I forgot it now. I just think that
his wife, for example, like she gave a press conference yesterday and it was heartbreaking. Like anybody who watches that, it would shock their conscience. And there is absolutely a way to capitalize on that and draw attention to it and tell a very human story. I think that's what Democrats, if they want to tackle this immigration issue, they need to not speak in generalities and focus on the individual stories, the lives that are being impacted in this way. I think we can all imagine waking up and your spouse was sent to one of the worst prisons in the world. That would be, I imagine that happening to Esme, and I fucking almost cried yesterday just thinking about that, like watching this woman speak. And so we need to get her message out there. We need to show people her story for sure.
It's wild, but Democrats need to have a really good affirmative message on immigration. Did you guys see that video that went viral on Twitter a few months ago? It was Obama's 2012 message on immigration. And I can't recall it verbatim, but he had a very strong message. It was honestly like equivalent with what Trump would say on the campaign trail, but just less deranged and less ununhinged. It was like maybe not exactly the same, but he was strong.
He was talking about getting him to speak English and having him assimilate and stuff. Yeah, it was very moderate, right? So
yeah. And the thing is, Democrats lost that, and we created this vacuum, and Republicans were able to fill that vacuum. So if Democrats want to talk about Abrego a bunch, I would make the argument they should also have like an affirmative. What would we have done? How would we have fixed the system? How are we gonna? Yeah, but that's asking a lot.
Well, I mean, I think that's kind of the, like when people say they want mass deportations, it's people brought up the Medicare for All example, like, oh, do people really want this? It's not clear. Like, I think that all that is when you see these like wild, disparate poll responses, what that is people are not very informed on the technicalities of policy. They have a basic intuition. Oh, people should have health care. We should take care of the poor. I like immigrants, but maybe mass deportation is a good idea, as contradictory as those things are. Messaging really matters on these issues, right? I mean, to Adam's point, like Obama comes in 2012 and has, probably the most like sort of American sensible message. I recall that pretty vividly, where he essentially says, look, we're a country of immigrants. We believe in immigration. But if you came here illegally, you should have a pathway to citizenship, but you should also pay a fine for coming in illegally. And you should have to learn English, this kind of thing. And that seemed to be a message that the Democratic Party could get behind, and also like broader America could seem to be very sensible. And I think Democrats, for the most part, have been a little bit acquiescent on some of the right issues. It's like, look, if you're a violent gang member, I just don't think anybody really gives a shit if you get deported, right? I mean, I don't really know why that would be a big deal. Pisco might have a harder line where it's like, look, pure procedural grounds, like these things really, really matter. And I think Pisco's right on that. Obviously, most people, though, are not really going to give that much of a shit if a bunch of gang members get deported. But the point here is that that's not actually what's even happening, right? Like what we have here is an administration that is like testing the outer bounds of what is theoretically legal for them to do under like very authoritarian legal theories, the unitary executive theory. Hey, look, we can deport these people because we fucking just want to, right? And that's basically what the administration is trying to get away
really
with.
Quickly, I got a hard out. Sorry, I forgot I gotta go now. But I'm gonna so it was really nice. Let's do this again. Let's do this for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
I'm gonna shut down my stream. People in chat were asking where they can find you guys because they really enjoyed what we were saying. So you can
Econoboy.substack.com, Adam. Of course.
You can use any one of our streams. Hutch has a stream right now on. Econoboy has I believe has a stream on right now. I have a stream on right now, and so that's Hutch on YouTube, Hutch on Twitch, Pisco on Twitch, Pisco Zauer on YouTube, and then econoboy.substack.com. Right? Is that right?
Econoboy.substack.com, and then look up Hutch or Pisco on Twitter if you want to continue watching. I gotta go. Yeah. Love you guys. That was fun.
Cheers, man. Thanks for coming by. Appreciate it.
Cheers.
That was great.
See you later.
Econoboy, I do want to respond to what you just said because, sure. Oh my God, now I'm like wide
Pisco.
You got the cinematic view, man. It looks good.
Oh my God,
that.
Because you said something really good and something that I struggle with, because on the one hand, I feel like it's bait to argue. Look at that. That actually looks better. To argue like the merits of whether or not Abrego Garcia is a good person, right? It really shouldn't matter. But the reason we have to, right? The reason we have to do that is because unfortunately, people are these, I think, unthinking pack animals that just, if you're a bad person, they don't care what happens to you. But the problem is, the reason it's a substantive problem is, once there's a due process loophole for any category, right? If there's a due process loophole for any category, now you've just fucked everything up, because now the government's just going to allege anyone they don't like fits into the loophole that you put out. And if you've put a loophole for even determining whether or not you fit into the category of whether or not you get due process, that is just a black hole, because you need due process to figure out whether you're in a category of no due process. And there needs to be, unfortunately, fighting here.
And there's a different angle to that, which is that if they admit fault, make a good faith effort to bring him back, and then give him due process, now all of a sudden, who else does that apply to that they sent? You know, how many dozens of people have they sent to this prison so far? And what it has implications for, like, how they're going to have to operate moving forward. So they have this like incentive structure in place to, you know, not go along with this court order, because it would severely hamper their efforts so far.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why the administration is going full-blown propaganda on this guy, the Abrego Garcia guy. It's like he's a violent gang member. It's because nobody would stand for the idea that the government could just allege that you're a gang member and then send you to a gulag in El Salvador. Nobody would stand for the facts of this case, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why we on this show obviously talk about why messaging is so important.
It's wild, and it's best when you have an actual one-on-one discussion with one of these motherfuckers. That's why I've been trying to, I'm pushing it on every angle to try to get these conversations out in the public, because once you get them on a standard, which is like, okay, so an uncorroborated anonymous allegation that you are an MS-13 member by someone we don't know, producing a report by someone who's like paying off a prostitute and is disgraced, you know, breaking the law and that kind of shit. That should be enough to send you to a gulag where the president of El Salvador says they're never going to leave. So you should get the essentially like life in prison on the basis of that assertion. And that's your standard. Okay. So you agree then that insert name here, Donald Trump should be in a gulag for the rest of his life based on, bare assertions of those kinds. Andrew Tate should be in a gulag for the rest of his life without any opportunity to do anything. We're like, so those standards become very impossible to defend in the context of one-on-one conversations, in a way where, in terms of like overall messaging, it's hard to kind of soy out and be like, but guys, it's really important to have due process, even though it is really important.
On a different topic, I don't know if you guys saw the story. I didn't click into the story. I just saw the headline. But did you see the reporting that David Hogg apparently is setting his sights on a bunch of moderate incumbents in the Democratic Party?
He's been on that line for a while. I mean, he was very against Mary Paltola because she was soft on guns or whatever. He seems to be very, I guess, understandably, very, very radical on the gun issue relative to the American public. I didn't see what his exact plan was, though. Hutch, is it? I mean, I assume it's not just guns. No,
he has a war chest of funds, and he plans on using it to deploy to races all over the country, which is pretty remarkable for like what is he, the vice chair of the Florida DNC, coming out and saying like he's going to basically wage a civil war. I mean, you guys talk a lot about primaries, and I'm typically the one that's a little bit more wary of these things. Not that I'm like strictly opposed to them, but I think we need to be tactical about it. He seems to be going a little bit more scorched earth here. Like it's like a wide berth. It's not just one or two races that he wants to get involved with. Like he really wants to start replacing these.
He watches Live and Learn.
Moderates. Maybe.
I mean, I think, it's just going to depend. I mean, for me, it's always just going to depend on the rationale, right? Like, I think that going after Mary Paltola because she's soft on the gun issue, I don't know. I mean, I find that when it comes to the gun issue specifically, obviously it's a big issue in our society. So many people die from guns. But at the same time, I just think like it's a big issue. But when it comes to like the bare minimums for our standard for our party, I think there are a few things, and Hutch, you responded to me on Twitter. I think there are a few things that the party should have as bare minimums, right? And if you don't, fall under that, you should absolutely be primary. There's simply no question. One bare minimum is like you're in support of democracy and our basic democratic frameworks and institutions. One bare minimum is you support sort of, let's say, a broadly egalitarian ethos, which includes like a welfare state and public services. If you're one of these like Club for Growth Democrats like Henry Cuellar, get them out of here. If you ask me, that's crazy. If you ask me, but when it comes to the gun issue, it feels like all those other issues just seem like much bigger, sort of like macro issues. Now, for David Hogg specifically, I could totally understand where you're like, look, this is my number one issue. Like, I was like almost a victim of gun violence from my school. It's like totally understandable. But that I don't think it just seems like
Who the
strategically
fuck
there's
cares?
some.
You have a job as a DNC, so you have a job as a DNC vice chair, and I think it's the vice chair. He's one of the vice chairs of the national of the national party, and I don't think that we should take these pet issues. And I'm sorry, I would consider your stance on gun policy to be a pet issue. I agree with Econoboy that my line is don't be MAGA. My line is don't support Trump. That seems like it'd be a totally fine line. If you support Trump, if you are enabling Trump, if you're enabling MAGA, I want your ass gone. If you're weak, and that's a kind of, I think, neutral ideological ground in terms of the weeds of these policies. Another neutral line is if you're too fucking old. If you're too old, get out. But if what's happening, I haven't read that much into it, so I don't know. If what he's doing is he's trying to knock off incumbents in difficult races because of gun policy, I think that's fucking stupid.
I'd have to
but
look into the reporting. Some people in chat were saying he was going after older people, but I don't know. So you might be aligned.
I only know about the primary issue with Mary Pautola. Look, I'm not quite as dismissive as Pisco. I think it's very reasonable to have your sort of pet issues that are, because for instance, there's a lot of like Palestinian and Muslim Americans that they find, a sort of solidarity on the issue of Israel-Palestine. I find that to be very reasonable. And now I understand that on one hand, we could always say, well, look, you have to see the bigger picture and you might not want to vote for like Kamala Harris because of Genocide Joe or whatever, but all these millions of kids that are going to be in poverty when they cut the welfare state are probably a little bit like you should probably calculate them into your analysis as well. I'm essentially just saying the same thing to David Hogg, that it's perfectly reasonable to have kind of your personal pet issues that you want to vote on certain things and like you think that that's important. But especially like Pisco said, like when you're in a position of power within the party, I think primary challenges are very, very important. I think it's very important to hold people accountable when they don't really fall into those bare minimums. And like Hutch said, I don't know if this particular move is like very gun related, very gun motivated or not. I just think that, it's going to depend on like the reasons as to why he wants to primary these people. Because look, I mean, when kids are getting shot in their schools, that's a really big issue. I don't want to trivialize that. It's
just a really tough fight to pick in Alaska where there's just a lot of hunting that goes on in that state. And so, it's kind of makes sense that you would have a more moderate stance reflected in the elected representative there. To the disagreement that I had with you on Twitter, and I guess I didn't actually check to see if you replied, so like I forgot that I put that post up. But you had put out there was somebody expressing a sentiment about how we should like
Ro Khanna.
Was it Ro Khanna? It was about pushing rich people like out of our coalition, and you said some. Okay, if I mischaracterize, I don't mean to mischaracterize it. So go ahead and tell me what it was about.
Yeah. So basically, it was kind of a chain of tweets. So I really honestly don't know why people. So Ro Khanna, he gives this speech. I don't actually know where he was giving the speech. It was like in Ohio. I have a feeling Ro Khanna is angling for maybe running for president because he's been going to Iowa and all these other Rust Belt places. That's just my sense of things. I could be wrong, but I think that's what's happening. But Ro Khanna, he gives this speech where he talks about the quote that Noah Smith, No Opinion, who I like generally speaking, he's responding to. Ro Khanna says, Franklin Roosevelt warned of the economic royalists, men who amassed wealth, rigged the rules, and tightened their grip on power. That ideology is back. And what Noah Smith said in response to that was, this is dumb messaging. Rich people are getting screwed by Trump's tariffs too. Them still pushing we are the 99% bullshit, like it's 2011 is voluntarily shrinking their tent. And
so he left out the corruption sort of element of Ro Khanna's tweet.
Well, he was responding to like the tweet from Ro Khanna, which was just like a direct quote from the speech. It was like the most relevant part. And Noah Smith interprets that as like, oh, we're just like voluntarily shrinking our tent. It's like, what? Like, I mean, look, if I go out as a Democrat and I say, hey, I think we should, rebalance the economy in favor of the working class, in favor of the poor people of this country. And a rich person hears that and says, well, God damn it, this ain't the party for me then. It's like, all right, I guess, you have to have standards, right? I mean, we're pro-choice, we're pro-gay marriage, like I'm sure that there's a lot of positions that Democrats are not a party for everyone in some literal sense. I mean, there's going to be some basic things about Democrats that people like. Some people are single issue gun voters. They're like, oh, you want to regulate guns? I'm just never going to vote for you then. It's like, okay, fine. But that's just, I'm a Democrat though. Like we have to maintain some sort of standard.
If that's what you
right?
meant, then I agree. So I misunderstood you then. Yeah.
I think Noah Smith misunderstood because or Noah Smith just has a kind of a, I know Rokan is kind of a, he's a controversial guy in the policy wonk space. But you know, when it comes to what he said, though,
do you stan Noah Smith?
Do I stan him? I mean, he says a lot of things
Yeah.
I agree with. I don't know if you have something in your head that you really disagree with him on. You know,
No,
he's
I'm just wondering whether you stan
I
him.
kind of stand him, to be honest with you. I think generally he's based. Yeah.
I think he's generally pretty good. I mean,
Okay.
he's a progressive who is in favor of industrial policy and the welfare state and things like that. I think he endorsed Elizabeth Warren in 2020, which kind of maybe gives you a barometer of where he stands ideologically speaking. And I think that's pretty good. You know, she's pretty good.
Sometimes he says things and I just go like this. I do one of these. Same with Rokana, to be honest.
Well, that
I'm
was this was one of those
what are you talking
instances
about?
where it was like, Noah, what's going on here? You know, I didn't
What are you
really
doing
get
here?
where he's coming from.
Well,
but anyway,
Speaking of various progressives that are touring the country right now, obviously angling to. I mean,
yeah.
people are making moves right now, and I'm just the king today of referencing polls without any fucking source. But another poll that I saw, I don't know what the poll was. It was a poll of Democrats, and this poll said that people were offered
AOC
like
at
three.
22.
People were offered like three different visions for how the party can function moving forward. There was one that's basically like stay the same. There was one that's become more progressive or try to accomplish more progressive things or whatever. And then there was another that said that we need to moderate. The progressive was a clear plurality of 50%, and it was kind of roughly even between the other two. So there does seem to be emerging right, and I don't know. Maybe you can partially credit Sanders and AOC for doing their activism so publicly. But there does seem to be the party does seem very ripe potentially for an insurgent sort of progressive takeover.
Our lefty progressives are people who aren't like Mel and Sean, who are cringe in France, and they're not like Jeremy Corbyn's in UK. Like our progressives actually care about like the country and actually care about. Again, maybe I'm overgeneralizing. Maybe I should read up more on these leftists in the country. But I don't really respect people who are pro Russia or who are kind of not in favor of helping Ukraine. But it's not as cringe. Like our leftists aren't as tanky as some of these other countries. I think we just should embrace them. We lucked out.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, I don't think I'm really that surprised. And again, I don't want to overblow that poll because I saw the same thing. I may have retweeted it myself where I don't know that people in the Democratic base are like, I am a progressive and I want the party to reflect, I should say, my progressive ideology. Rather, what I think is happening, and look, I'll take advantage of it because I do want progressives to win. But what I think is probably what's happening is kind of what Pisco and I have been saying for the last 7 months or something like that on this show, which is it seems like of the party who are vocally out there fighting, on a day-to-day basis, really putting the rhetoric out there, having very biting rhetoric, very biting criticisms with the administration. They're going to Coachella, they're doing rallies. It's only progressives. And we didn't ask Raja about this, who was on just now, but he's a part of the New Democrat coalition. I don't know if he fancies himself a progressive, but it just seems like fucking of all the Democrats who are out there really making a big stink of this shit, it's progressives. And so I'm not surprised that people in the party are like, fuck, I guess we should be more like these guys. Like they're the ones actually doing shit.
I just want them to get their shit together. I just want them, like I want progressives to take over as well, but I want it to be in a way that is lasting and impactful and meaningful. I don't want it to be something that's fleeting. Like the progressives get this opportunity to step up to a leadership position and then they squander it with like really questionable rhetoric. I'm thinking about Pramila Jayapal posting that picture of like the fire at the McDonald's and like shit like that, like doesn't work for me. I don't know if you guys remember her doing that. There was the bad fires down here in Los Angeles and there was a pretty iconic image of like, it was like 100-mile-per-hour gusts down here. And so there was this like the image of a giant McDonald's logo with a piece of shrubbery that was like bending in the wind and there was embers flying off of it. And she made She's just talked about like McDonald's contribution to fucking climate change, and it was just so stupid. Like that kind of stuff makes me a little bit nervous. So whoever is gonna like steer this ship in the progressive direction, I really just want them to be like savvy, pragmatic, and yeah, I want them to be competent.
Yeah, your messenger really matters a lot. I mean, luckily, I think Bernie is not I think he's being very purposeful by sort of like doing all these rallies with AOC, because I think that Bernie recognizes that the best person to really lead at least a large chunk of the progressive coalition is AOC. You know, and I'm not sure that, I don't think Bernie has like a particular problem with like Ilhan Omar or like Rashida Tlaib or people like that. But I think certainly he, you know, he has a relationship, he has a reason to sort of have, you know, AOC take over after him. And I think by all accounts, most likely, you're not going to see AOC run for president in 2028. You could see her try to primary Schumer, which would be so fucking base if she actually did
I feel
that.
like Bernie's going to run, bro. I feel like he's old as fuck, but I feel like he's going to do it. You don't think he's going to do it? Has he said he's not going to?
My toxic trait is, even though I think he's too old, I would vote for that ticket. I'd vote for a Bernie AOC ticket tomorrow. That's my toxic trait. I'm just telling you I would.
I mean, I would too, but I don't know if they could win. But
I'd vote for Bernie. I mean, I think Bernie is, you know, Bernie does not seem, Bernie seems, I don't think Bernie has suffered from his age as badly as Biden did.
No, absolutely not. No.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think Biden ever had dementia or was losing his mind or anything, but Biden was definitely slow. And Biden definitely sort of was a very kind of like shaky old person when it came to, you know, being on main stage and stuff. Bernie just really doesn't seem built that way. Like Bernie doesn't seem like he would have much trouble in a debate. He doesn't seem like he has much trouble just like, I don't know, just kind of walking around and being a part of the community, you know, being like kind of just a regular old guy. Obviously, he's old as shit. But I honestly don't think that Bernie is going to run in 28. My prediction would be that you're probably going to see, I think Bernie will be involved in the primary. Like I'd expect Bernie would get involved. He'll make a clear endorsement would be my expectation. He'll probably wait until close to Iowa or something like that, and he'll come out and endorse like fucking Tim Walz or like whoever the progressive that's coalesced the most support in the races. And I think that's probably how it'll go if I had to guess. But I don't know. It's a long time from now.
Kingmaker Bernie. Oh, I can't wait. We got to get there though first, folks. And we're dealing with an authoritarian regime. And so I want to bring us back down to earth a little bit here, because fuck, if we can't make it out of the next few, you know, months, the next 5 months with our democracy in hand, I think we're going to be in trouble. So on that front, I want to ask Hutch. I want to ask Econoboy. One thing that the congressman said was, you know, he acknowledged that we were Democrats that went a little bit too far potentially in lockdowns. I think he said lockdowns went a little bit too far, and that we needed as Democrats to admit that. I think that there's a certain flavor of that inward looking, which is prominent right now among Democratic circles. Let's not talk about it right now because I want to give my full statement on abundance later on, but I'll just say there's a kind of abundance style examination of the Democratic Party. And so I think it's good always to look inward at where Democrats can triangulate in terms of how they're going to approach their messaging on issues that are relevant right now. For example, immigration, where it absolutely relates to, you know, authoritarianism. I'm also scared of us going too far the other way around. And so in terms of right now, the messaging at the moment, not for 2028, where do you guys think Democrats should focus all of their attention in terms of fighting against the administration?
I think that answer is pretty obvious. I mean, like the tariffs are really unpopular and they're doing real damage, and the immigration stuff are not doing him any favors. They're clearly feeling defensive about it because they had an entire press conference about it today. And so those are two issues right now that are just complete winners for Democrats. Did you guys see that voters trust Democrats more on inflation right now? Like this is the biggest.
Yeah, I saw that.
This is the biggest fumble. Like this is the most accelerated fumble I've ever seen from any president in my lifetime. Sometimes I'm a bit prone to hyperbole. There's no hyperbole there. He squandered that what should have been a layup. Like conventional political wisdom suggests that the Republicans should have been able to sort of like ride that wave of blaming Biden personally for global inflation, and blaming him for the pain they felt, the economic pain they felt in 2022 and 2023 in particular. They should have been able to hang on to that for so much longer. And we're not even 3 months into the administration. And, and yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I was going to say, I think as well, like Trump is just clearly, even if your mindset is like, oh, we should drive a hard bargain, we should really negotiate these things, we should kind of have this like, mutual de-escalation of tariffs, with this kind of trade war that we're launching kind of thing. The problem with that is that Trump he's not a good negotiator, right? So for instance, let's look at the timeline of things, right? He comes out, he says, we're going to do this tariff, that tariff. He ends up not doing it on Mexico and Canada. Oh, we're going to do it again. He ends up not doing it again. We're going to do tariffs on all aluminum and steel imports. He ends up actually doing that. We're going to do tariffs on all car parts that are coming into the country. He has some exceptions that he puts into that. More on the exceptions later. Then he comes out and says, we're going to do this, reciprocal quotation marks tariffs on all of these different countries. But then he comes down, he backs off of that immediately. And he says, well, actually, we're just going to do kind of a universal 10% tariff. And then we're going to tariff the absolute shit out of Chinese goods, right? And, he starts escalating the tariff. We're going to do 48%, 58%, 100%. Recently, he's come out and said 245%. China's been escalating as well on their side. But the problem is that throughout all this time, policy insiders and people with the president's phone number who are big corporate leaders and CEOs of companies have come to him and begged him and said, please do not do this. You will destroy our company. You will destroy the economy if you do this. And so what has Trump done? You might say to yourself, that seems sensible. He would do these things. He's said, oh, I'm going to do the Chinese imports, but I'm going to exempt certain things from those imports. And so what people have to realize is if you think, oh, Trump's driving a hard bargain, he's doing this. No, he's giving his hand away to the Chinese.
And voters are not buying it. He's trying to claim 5D chess. It's a fucking, he's thinking 5 moves ahead and people are not buying that. They're seeing that and they see chaos, which it is,
Exactly. He's giving his hand away. Okay. So it makes no sense to do that. You're saying explicitly, please, China, my biggest vulnerability is these things. So let's just, come on, let's not escalate the trade war to those things. I mean, Jesus Christ. So it's a terrible strategy to deal with the Chinese government. You're essentially at the mercy of the Chinese government in terms of if they want to go ahead and go around and say, we're going to do an export tax, essentially force you to take the tariffs. That's what essentially Trump is doing. It's a terrible strategy, and you can really pound Trump on that. Now, I think that one thing that we should also pound Trump on is the benefits cuts. I think these guys, it's a tried and true method to destroy Republicans is they want to take your fucking Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, your food stamps away. That is something that does seem to actually motivate people because guess what? There are fucking tens of millions of people in this country who rely on those things, right? Who
are MAGA voters.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a broad base of people. There's a lot of poor people who vote for MAGA who unfortunately just don't realize they're voting for, the guy who wants to take their benefits away. So I think just pounding them on that message is a really good strategy as well. Sorry, I took up a lot of time there. Pisco, what do you want to say?
No, I think it's funny that have you guys seen the Phantom Menace memes? The best strategy to appeal to people, which I agree with, is to focus on the economic woes. Is like trade negotiations and trade policy, when that was like considered the most boring plot of a Star Wars movie. But now we understand why George Lucas started there. He was trying to warn us. I totally agree. Good.
There's another political tie to the Phantom Menace. My therapist described, because we talk politics sometimes, to be honest with you, me and my therapist. He described, and he described, I was talking about how Biden is perceived, and he compared it to the Sith Lord theory of Jar Jar Binks. So
oh yeah.
He's constantly kind of whatever. Anyways, it was a lot funnier when we were talking about. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's secretly behind the scenes maneuvering.
Yeah, it was playing off the idea that Biden is both devious and cunning and corrupt or whatever, and then he's also demented, and so it was playing up that.
Hutch, I saw you going after Hassan for Biden. You're still standing Biden. You're wasting your time doing that.
I mean, I just think it's so bro. I saw Hassan posted a tweet yesterday, and he was talking about how Brandon came back and he's still really bad. And I was like, okay, what was the speech about? Is it about like Gaza or something like that? And the whole speech is about him calling attention to the fact that Elon and Trump are legitimately, like right now, materially taking steps to gut Social Security, both like targeting it legislatively and then gutting the actual agency to the point where now, I mean, they got like Biden, for example, he got the wait times down. If you called into Social Security down to 15 minutes, used to be 45 minutes. That's going to go way back up again because he just fired like tens of thousands of federal employees. And so
Right.
it was just so like,
but that's not, he's not like listening to the speech. He just sees that he's kind of like an old guy and he's kind of being cringe, being old.
bro, this is just, I mean, listen, with,
I mean,
with friends
look,
like these, yeah, he was also shitting on Bernie Sanders too for saying that.
Oh,
he was,
I saw that. Yeah.
He was saying that Bernie Sanders has bad messaging on Israel because he says that Israel has a right to exist, which is like, regardless of how you feel about the conflict, like 99% of people think that Israel has a right to exist. It's like delusional to think that Bernie's not going to
super
take that
cringe.
position.
Super
you know?
cringe to go after the burn man.
Well,
Yeah,
look, I mean,
can't stand for it.
Look, Hassan's had the chance to ask Bernie and AOC these questions before. He doesn't do it because he knows that I mean, does he really care? I don't know. I mean, it's like you've had the chance to confront these people to their face, and I mean, what did they say, right? I mean, you know, you're getting these interviews with these people, and I don't know if it's that you don't really care, or maybe you've asked these questions and you still associate with them. Like, I don't know. If you're willing to make an exception on optimal messaging for Bernie, obviously we have to strategically make those exceptions for Biden as well. I mean,
Sure.
I don't know. I just think that my thought is like there is a portion of the left who are probably just never going to vote for Biden. But the reality is, like, I don't know, Jill Stein, she gets a few 100,000 votes of every time she runs for president. And it's not like these other groups and people make that big of a difference in the election outcome anyway. I think that generally, while it's true that a lot of people sat out the election because of progressive priorities, like Israel Palestine would be one of them, the reality is like the group of people that actually voted for Biden and actually set out because of Israel Palestine, these are people that are just way more obtainable than people like Hassan or like your average like Twitter lefty. Like these people, they sat out because they had a principle about Israel and Palestine, but they're not like that far gone that you just cannot reach or reason with them like Hassan and these other types. You know, I mean, the average,
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with that.
But these are real people. Like, these are just like real average voters, right? You know, your 10,000 Twitter leftists who are causing a stink. I mean, yeah, they're not really reachable, but I think that the actual, you know, the community of Dearborn, Michigan, very historically Democratic voting, you know, they're always represented by a Democrat for the most part. I mean, these are people who will, you know, come out if we offer them a compelling message as Democrats. You know, that's all we have to do.
I would put them in a separate camp. Like I'm talking about like the sort of like niche leftists that we've been referring to here. But I feel like if you're the type of voter that saw Trump, for example, stack the Supreme Court, and you know that resulted in Roe v. Wade being ended, and you couldn't find your way to voting for Kamala during this election, that's a really difficult. That particular niche like voter, and I'm not saying that there are fucking several million of these people or whatever. Those people are going to be really difficult to court, and I don't think we should spend too much time trying to court those people.
No, I agree, Hutch. But what I'm saying is that's a very small percentage of people, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? And so
it's just they have a really outsized sort of presence online, is what I'm saying.
Online,
like
yeah. But I mean, IRL, I mean, look, like if you go to your average DSA meeting, I mean, yeah, you might find a lot of people. I mean, yeah, you know, you go to your big DSA meeting and it's like 30 people, and like, yeah, maybe half of them are like, I'm never going to vote for the fucking Democrats. I'm going to vote for Jill Stein. And it's like,
have you been to a DSA meeting there, kind of boy?
I have been to DSA meetings, and look, there are caucuses within DSA or that are very, very electoralist. They tend to very, very stubbornly support Democrats.
How white was it?
How white was it? Well, I'm in
Hutch. You're just talking shit now.
No, but I'm serious. I want to know how white was it. Like 99% white?
No. I'm in Houston, the most diversity in the country.
Okay.
So it's a very diverse group of people. Diverse group of youngsters.
Hashtag.
Because I've seen some DSA meetings and it's fucking very white.
Everyone was disabled.
Right. But no, I mean, I think in general, you know, we shouldn't get, you know, I I just wouldn't get too bent out of shape from seeing people like Hassan. I mean, they do have some
I
influence.
do though.
But,
I do, and you can't fix me or change me. It's always gonna bug me. I want to build a coalition with Hassan. I would love if he was like on the team and united in opposition to what is so clearly the greater threat in this moment. I personally don't even view Democrats as a threat, but if you wanted to view them, it's so clearly the greater threat. I would love to unite with those people. They don't want to.
And your way to unite is to constantly talk shit and quote tweet, Hutch. Why don't you be a little nicer?
I tried for years. I literally tried for years to build bridges with these people, and at a certain point, I was like, "Fucking, this is a waste of time, bro." Every time I try to fucking
I'm
be
with
like,
Jank right now.
Jank is totally different. Listen, I'm willing to go. It's a different camp. I love that Kyle Kalinski's on the team right now. I'm fucking into it. He's like fully on the fucking just attack Trump. He got the memo, and I think he, and I'm sure we'll have our differences when the fucking 2028 primary kicks off. I'm sure that's going to cause some sparks. But wait, what's up?
He's my inspiration. Kyle's memes, I think they're just fuego. They're good shit. They're good shit. And yeah, I'm willing to make common cause with people who are attacking the administration and who know what the game is about and who celebrate, for example, when Democrats win elections against Republicans. But no, I think that I understand some of the frustration here. I also want to say that there's another coalition of left wingers that we might want to appeal to, and that is the coalition of MAGA communists. Infrared was just unbanned on Twitch. Thoughts?
What's her name? What's that one fucking crazy lady? She's got crazy eyes.
Crazy lady?
Ungar, right? Like I feel like that's in her name.
Ungar?
Yeah. What's her name again?
I don't know.
She's been on Piers. Come on, chat. Somebody in chat knows who I'm talking about. She's like literally MAGA communist. She thinks that Trump is taking on Wall Street and like, aligning with the working man or whatever.
Yeah, I mean you're MAGA communists like Hassan, or not Hassan, like Haas. Well, I mean, yeah, you're MAGA communists like that are a very that's a group that could fit in the room that I'm in. Like that's very niche. Yes, that's a very small group of people. I mean, I remember one time I saw I think was it Jackson Hinkle? I think I saw him like they had organized like this whole it was like the MAGA communist meeting, right? And I swear to God, it was like 150 people in this. It was like a very, very small group. So I don't know. I don't take them too seriously, to be honest.
Well, speaking of Kyle Kalinski, and maybe we can wrap up because I got to get some shit done about you guys. But like speaking of Kyle Kalinski, he is going to be the guest on next week's podcast. But
hell yeah!
But we're moving it to Monday because he can't do Wednesdays. But I've just been so fucking fired up by his Twitter account that I had to invite him on, and he was gracious enough to say yes. So he'll be coming on Monday, guys. So next week we're not going to be doing it on Wednesdays. We're going to do it on Monday at the same time, 4 p.m. Pacific. So that should be fun.
Yep, it should be fun.
Hell yeah! No, I can't wait for it.
Yeah, Pisco, you need to be nice. You need to play nice, okay?
Bro, Kyle,
don't turn off another guest. All right.
Which guests have I turned off?
You know what I'm talking about.
I turn on guests.
No, I'm just kidding.
I turn on them.
No, you sparred a little bit with Brad. That was fun to watch, but you guys played nice at the end.
Oh yeah, we DM'd afterwards. Yeah, we're all chill. We followed each other. We're moots now, and Kyle and I are moots as well.
Listen, I only will respect Brad after he agrees to debate me on the welfare state. All right, libertarians, they got to stop with their nonsense on the welfare state. All right.
Well, he told us. Remember when he came on? He's like, "I'm never going on Tim Pool ever again." So I thought that was kind of a long shot, but yeah,
that's true. That's true.
I would, and I'd go on Tim Pool again.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, guys, I mean, I guess that's good for the show this week. I mean, yeah, the next show should be on Monday. Josiah should be back. I think I'll actually be traveling. I'll just be on my iPhone camera, whatever setup like I was last time. So that'll be fun for the whole family, that show. But anything else, guys, before we hang up?
I want to just say shout out Josiah. I hope your moving in situation is going well, and we wish you the very best.
Exactly. All right. Well, thanks, guys. It was a good show.
Boys, had fun.
Stay cool.